Today's video is brought to you by my wonderful Patreon members, the folklore enthusiasts. Now let's get into this video.
And we shall be in it. Okay. Oh. Hello, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, I'm Jules, and I'm designing a theme park based on United States folklore and cryptids and urban legends called Urban Legends America Theme Park. Today, we're working on some new spaces for the park. Each of these will be basically dedicated or inspired by some different cryptids that I came across. With that in mind, I want each of these spaces to really be completely different from each other. I also want them to be different from what I usually do, so that's usually like a restaurant or a ride, or maybe even like a show or a line cube. So I want to do something that is different but still necessary to the immersiveness of theme parks. Today we are going to do some mood boards. So as much as I am guilty of diving into the deep end, I don't want to do that. So before I get into concept work, I just want to get a feeling for each of these spaces and kind of just have some fun. So I'm going to take you along on my process on how I do mood boards. They're really fun and really relaxing, and it gives me an excuse to have, kind of get out of the regular, like, just doing concept work and really just take my time with this. With that, let's dive into this process.
Okay, so I have my Canva open. This is not sponsored by any means by Canva, but it just makes everything easy for me to explore images and textures right on the actual site instead of like dragging and dropping stuff from like Pinterest, which if I can't really find anything on Canva and I feel like there are better images like on Pinterest or even just like on the web in general, I'll get a few of those. But I feel like I get pretty lucky in terms of finding things that suit this, especially since like a big thing for mood boarding is exploring and trying to like find images that maybe might not be right on the nose. First up is the Tommyknockers. If you're not familiar, these creatures are eerie little mine spirits from Appalachian folklore. Some say they're the ghosts of miners who died underground, while others trace them back to Cornish mythology, where similar creatures were said to warn miners of cave-ins or lead them to rich ore veins. When Cornish immigrants came to the U.S. to work in the mines, they brought that legend with them, and over time it blended with local superstition to become the Appalachian Tommyknocker we know today. According to some stories, these spirits knock on the tunnel walls or the support beams of the mine. Sometimes it was interpreted as a warning, or maybe just to make their presence known. Others believe they were intentionally hitting the support beams to cause a collapse. Some miners even left out food as offerings for them, hoping to stay on their good side or just as a way of saying thank you. But bad things could happen. At best, missing tools. At worst, cave-ins. Now, I don't want to get into too much detail about these areas because I want to deep dive into each when doing the concept work. Each one, I think, is really unique and has some fun backstory to go with it. It's killing me though because I'm just so excited to share what these spaces can do. With that being said, I will share a little bit about what I want the space to be, just to give some context to my thought process when making these mood boards. What I envision for this space is a walkthrough area that is an interactive experience. This area leads guests through an abandoned mine tunnel. It's not a ride, and I don't want guests to have to rely on props or technically buy gear to experience this area. The interactivity all comes from how the environment responds to you. So when doing this mood board, I wanted to use pictures that highlight what the environment would replicate, but all the added 3D items are nods to the feeling of the area. I love using multiple textures for mood boards, so I always use torn paper and dried flowers to bulk up the layers. I think this actually takes me more time because I just keep adding and dropping and figuring out what the right texture is or what the layers work best. I love anything that looks drawn or stamped. It really gives way for this feeling of hands doing this, like physically doing it rather than just digital. I love when it looks like a collage of ideas rather than just pictures. So more times than not, when I'm making mood boards, I always just want the images to be framed in some way rather than just the picture's raw edge. Or if I do, I want some added shadow to make it more photograph-like, or at least maybe a texture on top of it so that it comes off that way. I brought in some old coal miner photos to emphasize where the lore comes from, and then I'll add embellishments that I feel like are not just for the actual environment itself, but aspects of the culture it comes from. So that's why I just put butterflies and even a banjo, or maybe even some feathers and stuff. I also added a bat because the version of Tommyknockers that I interpreted them as was more like bat-like rather than gnome-like. I wanted them to be these evolved creatures that were more humanoid. However, I still have a depiction of sprite-like creatures in the notebook pages so that they both are alluded to. And there you go. I'll make some changes here and there as I continue on to the other boards, but just so that there's like unity, but you'll see in the final product at the end. Alrighty, on to the next. Let's head north to the dense, shadowy forests of New Hampshire, where whispers tell of a creature known as the Woods Devil. This elusive being has been part of local folklore since the 1930s, with tales passed down by lumberjacks and hunters who ventured deep into the wilderness. Standing between 7 to 9 feet tall, the Woods Devil is described as tall and slender, covered in shaggy tan gray hair. Its most distinctive feature is its behavior. It avoids human contact by hiding behind trees or standing perfectly still, blending seamlessly into the forest. This uncanny ability to vanish into the woods has earned it a reputation as a master of camouflage. Eyewitnesses have reported its horse-like face, long snout, and small eyes, along with the strong, unpleasant odor. The creature is mostly nocturnal, but can be active during the day, moving silently through the forest. It feeds on small animals and even scavenges, especially during the scarce winter months. The Woods Devil's eerie howls and screams echo through the forest, sending chills down the spines of those who hear them. These vocalizations are thought to be a form of communication or territorial display. With its stealthy nature and haunting presence, the Woods Devil embodies the mysterious allure of New Hampshire's deep woods, a legend that continues to captivate and terrify those who dare to explore its domain. So, for this cryptid, I wanted to do a gift shop. For now, let's just name it Ranger's Resupply. I want this to be inspired by old colonial cabins and farmhouses. I started with ripped wallpaper textures to set the tone. I really wanted this mix of the wilderness with traditional colonial aesthetics that people associate with New England. Something that feels like it's been standing quietly in the forest for decades. I usually start with photo frames because those items tend to be the most visually dominant and serve as focal points. I want those to flow across the board. Honestly, it doesn't matter what images I put into them at first. It's more about composition. I'll keep switching them out until they feel right. There's no real rhyme or reason. I just go by what feels right. That's really how all my mood boards work. I just keep adding and adjusting. It's basically instinct and feeling. So if it feels right, it stays. As I've said before, I enjoy the look of collages, and when I can add elements that are more subtle, like textures, cutouts, or unexpected color pops, I always enjoy that. The images themselves might be more obvious, but those layered details are what keep it fun and textured. Take the red bow, for example. There's no logical reason for it to really be there, like it's not in the story anywhere. But I wanted a pop of red to contrast with all the earthy greens, and it gives the piece an autumnal tone that I love, other than like the dried leaves and stuff. I also like adding some fabrics, and so in my mind, this red bow was kind of a way to give again that nod to like old colonial things. The stamp brings in even more texture and gives a little more on the nose detail that hints at the cryptid's location. I felt like this mood board gives off a very like classic cryptid core vibe, since this is a forest based legend, and so it only felt right to include imagery like a flashlight and worn hiking boots. I wanted everything to feel aged, used, and slightly withered, and I feel like this kind of allowed for like a nod to the woods devil itself, which is said to be constantly watching yet never seen, and always slipping just out of view. A big part of this mood board is also the inclusion of organic elements, like I said about the leaves, specifically dried flowers and herbs. While I usually add these to bring texture to the design, this time they hold a little more significance. The dried flowers and hanging herbs are a direct nod to the colonial cabin aesthetic in like farmhouse stuff or homesteading. They tie into that like old world feeling of a rustic outpost in the woods. Picture a hearth crackling, bundles of dried lavender hanging from the ceiling, and maybe a few sprigs of wild rosemary strewn on the tables as offerings or remedies. These details add that feeling of timelessness, a connection to the past, and a sense that something ancient lingers in the air. The idea plays heavily into the shop concept. I want visitors to feel like they've stumbled upon a forgotten ranger outpost, the kind that still stocks and supplies, but carries a lingering unease, as if someone left in a hurry or something still lurking nearby. Inside the shop, I imagine field notes, faux survival kits, trail maps, with cryptid sightings circled in red ink, or maybe even like connecting them with some red twine or something like that. Jars labeled with just like things, maybe hand-picked things, again, herbs, maybe even mushrooms. Again, we want to evoke that this is like homesteady in some way. Even some handcrafted trinkets made to look like offerings left for the creature. It's cozy, it's strange, it's just a little bit off in the right way. Anyway, yeah, this one's a little bit simpler than the others in terms of composition, but I really like the feeling it brings and what I'd be going for the gift shop. So let's get into our last board. All right, last but certainly not least is the Skunk Ape. In the shadowy depths of Florida's Everglades, amidst the dense mangroves and murky waters, whispers tell of an elusive creature, the skunk ape. Standing approximately 5 to 6 feet tall, this bipedal ape-like being is cloaked in long, dark reddish-brown hair, though some accounts liken its fur to the hue of a golden retriever. Its most notorious trait, an overpowering stench, a blend of sulfur and decay, that announces its presence before it's seen. Unlike its northern cousin Bigfoot, the skunk ape is uniquely adapted to the swampy terrain of the southeastern United States, particularly Florida. Eyewitnesses have reported sightings of the creature peering into windows, stalking vehicles and hikers, and even killing livestock. These encounters, dating back to 1818, paint a picture of a creature that moves with both animalistic grace and unsettling intelligence. This mood board is grimy in a fun way. I wanted it to feel like a weird roadside stop halfway swallowed by the swamp. Everything's damp, overgrown, kind of falling apart, but it's also colorful, loud, and a little gross in a charming way. The Skunk Ape's infamous smell really stuck with me, so I thought a bathroom area would be the perfect place to bring that aspect of the legend to life. It's a great excuse to try something different for the park, and I've never worked or really thought about a bathroom before, but just because something is a necessity doesn't mean that it can't be fun and thematic. That said, I don't want this to turn into a grimy bathroom. I still want it to be clean and comfortable for guests while maintaining the immersive theming throughout the space. This mood board was a blast to put together, especially with the swamp theme. I loved adding the stained paper effects to mimic water stains, and really wanted to incorporate organic textures like moss, vines, and even lily pads. I'm always thinking about how even the hidden layers of a space can be thematic, so nothing goes unnoticed, even if it's not directly in the guest's line of sight. The greenery was such a fun challenge. I love adding pressed flowers for texture, and I had a lot of fun playing with the various textures of the moss and vines to make everything feel cohesive. When I found the rusted stop sign, I knew it had to be part of the design. It's not something you'd typically find in the wilderness, but I think it really fit that grime vibe I was going for. I also grabbed some general environment pictures that really inspired me. I wanted to evoke the feeling of the swamp, and I ended up using stamps to break up the look of some of the papers, adding a subtle hint of a Bigfoot-esque creature in the mix. While I could have added more famous Skunk Ape pictures, I actually liked what I was finding as I put this board together. I didn't get to talk about it much with the other mood boards, but I just wanted to have the type reflect the creature and the environment I'm creating. I wish I had more space to add notes about the actual interior design of the area, but I think this still gets across the vibe I was going for. And that's it. Mood board number 3 is done. Now let's take a look at the final images, and I'll dive into my thoughts on how it all ties together.
I already said at the beginning of the video, I really do like mood boards because they're just fun, and they, again, are just like really relaxing. There's not a lot of pressure to be perfect with it because they're inherently just like kind of chaotic. At least my version of mood boarding is kind of chaotic. I don't really like things to be like perfectly together. I like it a little messy. I like things to kind of just flow on their own. I think one that I would do over is probably the Woods Devil. I feel like it just lacks just a little. I just think that the Tommyknockers and the Skunk Ape one, they're like more chaotic. I think it's just like more my style, whereas that one was a little more on the minimal side. Like I can look at it and just be like, I could fill that space. I could fill that space. I could add something there. And so I think there's a few things that I could add here and there that I think just like probably would make it a little more well-rounded in my eyes for what I like to do for mood boards. But overall, I think they're pretty good. I think they exactly evoke the feeling that I really want. And as far as I'm concerned, makes sense in my brain of like how I want the vibes to be and then going forward for the concept work. Now that the mood boards are done, we can finally move on with the concept work. For the next few videos, basically I want every video to be about that specific cryptid. So I want them all to have their own time to shine. So I'm going to take each one, which was the three, and let them have their standalone video, because I really do want to share with you the story and how I envision these spaces to be, because as much as it can be as interactive as like the Tommyknockers, I still want the bathroom for the Skunk Ape to be just as like lore heavy and be an experience for people, even if they're just like, you know, doing as nature intended. So just stay tuned for that. If you want a closer look at all three of these bad boys, I do plan to put them onto my socials. So the link to all my socials and more for me will be in the description below. And with that, today's video comes to an end. Pause. I want to show this one because I like this one. Where are you going? And with that, today's video comes to an end. If you like the music in my videos, you can actually check out the Absinthetic Orchestra over on SoundCloud, and I'll leave all their information as well as more things from them in the description below. Please consider giving this video a like, and if you like more stuff that I'm doing, if you like theme park stuff, cryptid stuff, please consider subscribing. All right, y'all, I'll see you later. Bye-bye. My eyes are glazing over. Yeah. Ooh.
A connection to the past in a sense of something that ancient liggers.
Ew, why? I'm sure that ASMR is just titillating.